In today's Farm Report, 2015 is the International Year of Soils. And to celebrate, the U.S. hosted the first Soil Health Summit. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse shares more.
The United Nations has declared 2015 the International Year of Soils, so it was appropriate that the first Soil Health Summit, held by the Soil Health Partnership, occurred last week in St. Louis. The partnership officially kicked off less than a year ago at the 2014 Commodity Classic. And Nick Gazer with the National Corn Growers Association says they've accomplished a great deal in that time.
First and foremost, the launch almost a year ago in February of 2014, launching the Soil Health Partnership. The idea for the Soil Health Partnership started in 2011. So within 3 years, we came to the point where we could launch the Soil Health Partnership. Along with that, we've also had the enrollment for demonstration farm sites across the Midwest, enrolling 20 farmers within the project. This project wouldn't be what it is without the farmers involved in the project. From there, we received a Conservation Innovation Grant through the USDA NRCS, and that's been incredibly supportive to the project to provide funds to help move us forward.
The partnership, which is administered by NCGA and was started with funding by Monsanto and the Walton Family Foundation, has also put together a distinguished scientific advisory panel, which includes representatives from universities, partner organizations, and USDA. Dr. Wayne Honeycutt, Deputy Chief for Science and Technology with USDA's Natural Resources Conservation Service, is a strong believer in the value of partnerships, especially when it comes to improving the health of our nation's soils.
It's just more than what one individual entity, government or private, could do by themselves. And what's really exciting, though, is that not only is it needed, but all these different groups are standing up and locking arm in arm to work together. And quite frankly, some of these entities are those that you would necessarily think that you would ever use in the same sentence together. But it's environmental groups, chemical groups, and government groups and private groups and foundations. All, I think, there's been kind of a collective recognition that by focusing on soil health gives us a fighting chance not only at being able to grow all this food for this burgeoning population, but to be able to also and address so many of our most pressing natural resources needs. It allows us to improve water quality, provide like habitat for pollinators. It just allows us to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, increase carbon sequestration, and it helps keep farmers profitable.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Coming up on the 19th and 20th, the annual Agriculture Department Outlook Forum in Arlington, Virginia. That first day, always a huge news day. That's when USDA's acting chief economist Rob Johansson will make his presentation, which will include the new USDA forecast for ag exports, farm income. Also looking ahead to spring, he'll make the very first USDA projections for
what our projected planted acres will be for the major crops and the expected prices. I'll also talk a bit about the renewable fuel standard, where we're at right now, and what prices look like for gasoline, ethanol, and biodiesel.
And this year, that area of biofuels is going to get extra attention.
It's been a long time since we've seen gas prices that are below $2 a gallon, and that has implications certainly for our ethanol and to a certain degree biodiesel producers, and it should be an interesting way to start a discussion on the renewable fuel standard going forward.
For more information on the Outlook Forum, get your web browser looking for USDA Outlook Forum. All the information is there, including registration and hotel information. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
Agriculture was mentioned frequently on a hearing last Wednesday on the Waters of the United States rule, where Congress grilled EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
Agriculture was mentioned frequently in the joint hearing Wednesday of the House Transportation Committee and the Senate Environment and Public Works Committee on the proposed Waters of the United States rule. The first panel with EPA Administrator Gina McCarthy and Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works Joe Allen Darcy lasted over 3.5 hours, with McCarthy repeatedly stating that normal farming practices are exempt under the rule, but agreeing that some issues need to be addressed, in the final.
The definition of tributary and how it relates to ephemeral streams is extremely important. How that all relates to erosional features that are exempt are excluded from the Clean Water Act jurisdiction. I think people have asked for more clarity on significant nexus. I think we need to provide it. And the ditch issue, it drives me crazy.
During the second panel, which lasted only an hour, Florida Commissioner of Agriculture Adam Putnam spoke on behalf of the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture.
I come here as a farmer, a citrus and cattleman, a former member of Congress, and an agriculture commissioner, and someone who has dedicated much of my career to water policy, water resource development issues. Counter to the claims by the EPA regarding intent, the proposed rule, in fact, will lack clarity, significantly expand federal jurisdiction, impose burdensome requirements on agricultural producers, and impede efforts to protect and restore the environment. Across the nation, farmers and ranchers are good stewards of the land, and the expansion of the federal jurisdiction under this rule will deem many areas of farmland as waters of the U.S. and therefore subject to federal jurisdiction.
Agricultural organizations were pleased that EPA and the Army Corps did withdraw the interpretive part of the controversial rule, which National Cattlemen's Beef Association Vice President of Government Affairs Colin Woodall says helps open up a full discussion on WOTUS.
What this originally was an attempt by EPA to try to tell farmers and ranchers that they would not be harmed by the Waters of the United States rule. Unfortunately, it was nothing more than just a smokescreen, because what it did was actually not protect producers. It actually just made it harder for them to do the typical farming and ranching activities on their own operation. So to be able to pull this out is able to kind of lift some of the cover off of Gina McCarthy as administrator, doesn't give her anything to hide behind, and really does open this up for a full discussion on just how bad the Waters of the United States proposal is.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
We are now in the middle of tax season, preparing our forms to file before the April 15th tax deadline. And while it's important to get all of our essential documents, such as W-2 forms and annual interest reports, together for our taxes, Ann Berry of University of Tennessee Extension says just as important,
keep your information safe and secure, because people try to take advantage of people. There's a lot of scams and frauds going on.
In fact, Berry notes,
this year they've already had people being emailed and called on the phone telling they owe taxes or this, that, and the other. And the IRS will not do that. They will notify you in writing first. And so people need to be aware that there's a lot of people trying to do some illegal things.
The Internal Revenue Service reports another scam as victims are told they have a refund due in an effort to solicit private information. And an email phishing scam to watch out for, an email that includes a link to a bogus website that mirrors the official IRS website. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
The Department of Health and Human Services and the U.S. Department of Agriculture have formed an advisory committee to work on the 2015 dietary guidelines. And some recommendations by the committee is raising some ire and concern by advocacy groups like the National Cattlemen's Beef Association. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
The beef cattle industry is keeping a close eye on the latest proposed dietary guidelines due out this year. At the Cattle Industry Convention last week in San Antonio, National Cattlemen's Beef Association Executive Director of Legislative Affairs Christina Butts gave an update on their concerns about what the Dietary Guidelines Advisory Committee has proposed.
Every 5 years, two agencies come together, the Department of Health and Human Services and the Department of Agriculture, and they create what we call an advisory committee. And there's 14 people on this advisory committee that have a medical or a health background, and they've had meetings. The first time that NCBA engaged in the 2015 Dietary Guidelines was actually in 2012. So we've been very involved in this process from the beginning, obviously submitting scientific comments, weighing in, giving testimony in Washington to the advisory committee. Well, what happened at their 7th meeting is the advisory committee went way beyond where any discussions have ever gone before in more than 30 years of these nutrition discussions in Washington, and they actually removed lean meats from what they consider to be a healthy diet for Americans. So obviously, NCBA is very concerned by this. We've shared that frustration and our concern with various levels at USDA and the Health and Human Services Agency. We've also submitted comments to say there's more than 30 years of research that shows the benefits of lean meat and beef in the diet, but yet you still made the unprecedented move, the advisory committee did, to remove that from what they consider a healthy diet. So the other thing that they also did is they're actually encouraging Americans to eat less red meat and processed meat. So that's another area, too, that we're going to engage on. And where we sit right now is that the secretaries are reviewing the recommendation, and Secretary Vilsack has been very clear that it's just a recommendation, and there's going to be a comment period. And this is where we're going to need anybody interested in food, anybody interested in school lunch programs, school breakfast programs, senior and summer feeding programs, military feeding programs, to make sure that they're submitting comments and they're weighing in on this process. So we think by the maybe within the next 2 weeks of February that we'll actually have the science report that people can comment on. And then once that closes, at some point later this year, we're going to have the 2015 dietary guidelines.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
In terms of creating new and expanded agricultural opportunities, Agriculture Secretary Tom Vilsack says
we'll potentially be confronted with the Trade Promotion Authority, giving the President the ability to fast-track trade deals, and we have hopefully the ending of negotiations on the Trans-Pacific Partnership,
which Vilsack says will open doors for American agriculture.
The Asian countries that are involved in the TPP that we commonly refer to the Trans-Pacific Partnership as, it's 40% of gross domestic product globally. It's a third of all world trade. It's emerging middle classes, likely to grow from 570-some million to over 2 billion in a relatively short period of time. Huge market opportunities for us.
One of the unfinished opportunities 2015 presents, says Vilsack.
As a continuation of the action and the partnership that we've had in the past is this issue of trade.
Negotiations on TPP got underway the last week of January. For USDA Radio, Susan Carter, Washington, D.C.